Well, I got it off.
Alrighty. Lights, camera, and action for take like 7 on this. But let's hope it works this time. Jake rocking his Carolina Panthers colors today. And we are here for week 3 review, week 4 pre. Doing very well at this so far. I have lost. Oh no, Jake's back. I lost Jake for a second there. Um, so let's just jump into it. We had the game of the week created by the people who made the crazy trade of the week between Jacob and Trevor. Talk about your big loss today, Jacob.
I don't know if I'd call it game of the week because there was no game of the week last week, but we could go with that. Yeah, I took a nice L, so that made me trade all of my whole team off. That was fun. So basically, none of them did that great, and then I decided that I didn't need them anymore. And now we are where we are, and Trevor's team's good again.
Fair enough. Saquon has been going bonkers so far this year. As you know, that's good.
Boy, he's out again, boys. All right. Yep, Saquon's been going crazy, and then Ramondre came back down to earth. Ramondre then got traded to me, so I'm sure he'll do so much better now. Looking at the rest of the team, Dallas Goedert, I think, is what really killed me. Anytime Dallas Goedert scores 22 points, you're probably pretty screwed. Looking at Trevor's team as a whole, I think his quarterbacks are performing a decent amount better than anyone would have expected right now. I think I need to learn how to pick the right quarterback. That would have been helpful for me the first few weeks. He's back now.
I, I I have no words. I don't even understand because my Wi-Fi, other than when I try and do this, is fine. I'm on a different computer in a different location, and still it goes out. I'm done. I'm upset.
Well, I don't know what you did. Your picture is a lot clearer now, so maybe your internet just kicked in or something. Um, I covered pretty
Whatever.
much. If you want to talk about my team, you're more than willing to. You're more than you can if you'd like.
Yeah, that's grammar we got there eventually. So there's not much to talk about given that your team evaporated. Are we talking about the trade now? Are we focusing on the game now? What's the let's see here?
Uh, I think we could go either way. I put it first since the trade happened, so we could talk
So
about
yeah,
it.
we'll talk about the trade then as well. But it's so funny looking at the sleeper app because it just says off roster for half the people on the team. But you gave up Darnold, you gave up Lamb, you gave up Cooper, who both started this week. Jonathan Taylor was maybe your first pick in this draft ever. Um,
Chris Godwin was my first pick in this draft.
Wild that you remember that. But anyway, um, your team is interesting. As anybody who didn't see, Jake traded many players, including CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Sam Darnold, and Jonathan Taylor, and also a 4th-round pick. Do not forget the 4th-round pick. He got 3 firsts, 2 thirds, a second, Jonathan Brooks, Ramondre Stevenson, and Khalil Shakur. So 2 running backs, 3 first-round picks, including 1 this year, and Trevor goes all in. You went all the way out. Trevor went all the way in. Very different scenario here.
Yeah. I don't know if it's worth me. I guess I could say what I was thinking. That'll make things easier. Um, I just didn't think I'd make the playoffs. I didn't want to risk one of them getting hurt, losing value, and then having to deal with a bunch of nonsense. It felt a lot safer to just make this trade at 0-3. It was available to me. Well, it was more or less sent to me, and then a little bit of workshop, and there we go. We'll say bye to CD and Jonathan Taylor, 2 of my favorite players. But on the bright side, I don't have to root for any Cowboys again, so that's awesome.
Yeah, and Trevor is all the way back, it would seem. You look at his lineup now, and he really has some fun pieces. He puts Darnold, who becomes possibly his number two QB, maybe he's probably his number one technically right now, but that's a whole different story. His wide receiver unit of Wilson, CD, and Devontae is pretty awesome. Amari Cooper slots in 4. Then you got Jonathan Taylor and Barkley as his running back combination, which is a little crazy. Trevor is very good right now, but his depth is not where it needs to be, probably, or where, if any injuries happen, he's in trouble. And he's got no draft capital. But this was a huge move, and Trevor sent it, so I cannot blame him, and I appreciate you two keeping the league interesting. Still want to veto it. But I think that can bring us to our next game. We have Big T versus Weop, and our buddy Mitch has already declared he will not be watching this podcast this week after his over 60 point, just destruction at the hands of Big T, who probably becomes the number one team in the Penn State division pretty easily.
Yeah. I mean, Big T seems like all he's got left is a hole at tight end. That being said, seems like every single person in this league has a hole in tight end right now, so that's not really a big deal. I bet Big T probably had one of the highest scores at tight end this week with his 8.2.
Mm-hmm.
Malik Willis comes through, so no Jordan Love, no problem. I think his running backs, I mean, I don't expect Derrick Henry to have 30-point games very often this year, but he definitely had one this week. And then Malik Neighbors looks like a beast. So does Rashee Rice. I don't know. Yeah, he's probably got one of the better teams in the league. We'll get to the power rankings later, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, he has one of those teams that you don't think should be as good as it is. He's got 2 top 5 wide receivers right now, which is crazy. I think that just doesn't. It can't. I can't imagine it keeps up. Neighbors is getting like 70% of the targets of every Danny Jones throw. Like that can't happen.
He deserves it.
Yeah, of course he deserves it, but like teams are going to start just quadruple teaming him and letting Danny Jones throw to anybody else on the field. So Tom's team is looking good. I guess I'm not fully sold yet, but I feels like I should be because this dude just wins. And between his running backs and his wide receivers, and even freaking just picking up Malik Willis to dominate, he's in pretty good shape.
Yeah, never mind. Jordan Love's going to come back. Aaron Jones on the bench just scoring 20 points a game. He's got a lot of pieces right now. On Mitch's side, he's kind of caught the injury bug right now. I mean, he started Adonai Mitchell. I don't think anyone would have expected him to start Adonai Mitchell going into the year.
To be fair, it was a bad start. Hopkins and Sutton both had decent games sitting on his bench.
Yeah, I probably would have started one of those guys, but it's all right. Anyway, he had AJ Brown and Debo on the bench because they're both hurt. That's somewhat unlucky, and probably a good thing because he would have lost no matter what, probably to Tom this week.
Yeah, tough week for Mitchell. And even with all that stuff we just talked about, he still put up 90 points, which is decent. And he's still 2-1, so his first loss of the year. And 2 guys competing at the top of the Penn State division, which I think can lead us to our next one, being myself versus Trent.
Yep. Pretty solid first game for Dak for you. I've always thought about trading for Dak, and I was like, I just can't do it. But anyway, I think that your running backs did solid. Your wide receivers are kind of set in stone, so they had pretty good weeks. I don't think they had anything. They weren't anything crazy this week, but they did plenty to get you the win. And then Yeah, I don't know how I don't know how you consider it. I'd consider Dak your one, but your two position seems a little shaky right now. I don't know. I don't know what Trevor is at this point. I don't think he's been what he was cracked out to be to this point. Maybe he will be at some point, but I don't think you can really rely on him for good fantasy production right now, at least.
Yeah, I don't know. I still have so much trouble getting, um, getting off the Trevor Lawrence train, but who knows? As you said, my wide receivers being Jefferson and Marv, although Marv is hurt. I did have some bench wide receivers that produced pretty well, with Rome and DJ Moore on the bench this week. But put up 110. You put up 110, you're probably gonna win most weeks. So I cannot complain. Dak was pretty good. A trade we hadn't talked about previously, but with our off week of doing this. But Dak, I thought that was a solid trade between Cam and I. Go Braves. I know their game is postponed today, but Cam has been very annoyingly talking about the Mets a lot with me recently. So go Braves. Um, chop it up. Anyway, moving on to Trent. Tough week other than Josh Allen. Josh Allen continues to be that guy, but it doesn't seem like there's much behind Josh Allen, at least this week when it comes to Trent. Pacheco's injury, Cup's injury. Now it's kind of, what we talked about earlier in the year. His depth is coming to kind of bite him in the butt.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think we disagree about his depth a little bit. But I think Terry had a pretty good week. Godwin had a good week. I don't know. Maybe I think he just has a lot of hard decisions. I don't know what you're doing with Tyreek Hill until Tua gets back. If Tua is back, I'm assuming he comes back, but who knows? Ayuk probably has better days ahead. 10 targets, only 5 receptions. Stafford probably not the greatest start until those receivers are back at this point, and then not really sure what has happened to Laporta. Seems like he's lost a decent amount of that market share to Jameson. Is that going to stay the same? Who knows? But yeah, it's just dealing with injury problems as well. So better
And
days.
yeah, that we're way too early to be talking about playoffs, but this was probably a big win in the Penn State division. Trent's always been pretty good, and so I was very happy to at least be sitting here at 2-1.
Go, Chris.
Woohoo, Chris! That brings us to Mr. Cam versus Biondino. Biondi, even though he was rooting for the Braves, did not kill out the win this week in a very close one where a lot of crap was being told about when Zach Ertz was going to score his 6 points. Cam narrowly survives, winning by 5. And I mean, that's how you make the playoffs. You score 93, you end up getting a win that week. So Cam, I think, put it as he's the worst 3-0 team. I don't know about that. I think he's still pretty solid, although Rashid Shaheed being a starter is tough, even with his early season marks. And DK finally had a good game, though. And I don't know. I don't know what you think about his running backs. I kind of feel like Singletary is a start at this point in time. It feels like he's getting enough touches with the Giants that he probably should be starting at the flex for Cam.
Yep, I kind of like Singletary as well. I don't know. I mean, I don't think he's starting over Mason or Cook, but maybe you just start DK Diggs and then go Singletary or Brian Thomas. That's probably the way I would be doing it. But Cam's 3-0, so he knows better. So he knows what he's doing. Moving on to Steve's team. I think he's starting to come to real problems. Anthony Richardson has like a 50% completion percentage this year. That's just not going to do it offense-wise. Seems like they're really running the offense through Jonathan Taylor. Can't really blame them when your quarterback's completing half his passes. And then looking at his team, the running backs didn't do quite as well as previous weeks. Still pretty good. The receivers are going to be pretty solid every week. Olave and Collins are good players. And then he had some injuries this week as well. So Akers being in your flex isn't going to happen every week. So Cam sneaks by.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I trust Kamara to keep up the production he's had. And I think Richardson is, I don't know, he still scares me every time he throws the football. He really does. He, he has so many intangibles that are really awesome, and his athleticism is crazy, and his arm talent is crazy, but like it just doesn't go well. But Beyondy's in an okay spot. If he starts Watson over Richardson, I think that's a win. Math is not that's a win. That's 9 points. So, Beyondy with a few minor missteps there, but again, this was a big game for the Stony Brook division, 3-0 for Cam, 2-1 for Beyondy, and it's setting its way up to, for maybe a 2-horse race at the top of Stony Brook with Bryce kind of somewhat close behind and Trevor falling off the map because he's not going to win that many games. I honestly forget he's in the Stony Brook division. I was like, man, I couldn't, as I was speaking, I was like, who the heck is the last person in that division? And I forgot it was Trevor. So I apologize. It is not a 2-horse race. I just forgot what division Trevor is in because he's so near and dear to the Penn State heart.
Fair enough. All right, moving on. Next game we had was Skullcap versus Lamb Chop. I think before the year we would have considered this an upset, and now I don't really think it is really an upset. The running back position has kind of worked out for Lamb Chop at this point. Kenneth Walker being hurt helps him a lot with Charbonnet. And then... Anyway.
We are live. Be a professional. What is that? Gosh, I apologize to all of our fans. That's crazy. To do that live is just ridiculous.
I'm not a professional and I don't apologize. Bucky Irving seems to be winning some time there. Looking at the teams, Jaden Daniels might be that guy at this point. I mean, Cincinnati is miserable on defense, so we'll have to see what he does against other teams. But if he's going to carry the ball 12 times a game, he's probably going to be super useful in fantasy.
No, we talked about it in our draft stuff. We're both pretty high on Daniels. I think it's hard to say Lemon at this point, 3 weeks in, didn't make the right choice at 2 there. But, Lemon sitting here at 2-1, his only loss was to me. Again, he only put up 96, but a win's a win. His wide receivers probably underperformed a little bit. Bo Nix is looking okay sitting on his bench. He maybe actually has 3 startable quarterbacks. And again, part of his issue is his team, other than quarterback, kind of starts itself. He doesn't really have anybody that can kind of step in there very much. Maybe he has some flex capability, but he just keeps winning, and we love to see it because we all root for Lamb Chop to do good things. On the other side, we have Shawnee Daddy, and his team is in a much, much different spot than it was a year ago at this time. CMC going to go see a specialist in Germany is kind of terrifying, at least in my, he was a game time decision week 1, and now all of a sudden he's going to Europe to see a doctor because we don't have one in America that can answer his questions. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like a great sign. Other than that, Lamar and Amon-Ra continue to be really nice pieces for him, but Sean is in a little bit of trouble, I would say. And, he has nice pieces that maybe it's time he calls it quits and starts getting some draft capital.
Yeah, I think it's some of these players are definitely. I'm not sure he's going to get the maximum value at this point. I mean, obviously, Amon-Ra and Lamar have super high value, but some of the other guys have probably lost some value at this point. So we'll see. I think he has interesting decisions coming up. Moving on to the next. Yep.
I just said yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so moving on to the next one, we have Taint Grease versus No Pond. I had to say that because otherwise Chris gets really mad every time I say his other name. Yeah,
doesn't have another name.
Fair enough. The QB injuries are really stacking up for Taint Grease. Now Herbert is hurt as well on top of Tua. Everyone knows that Taint Grease has no picks ever, so going to be hard for him to get another one after that. But the rest of his team really performed this week. So you had Gibbs, Kyron, and Jamar Chase really coming through for him. That carried him to get the win against Danny, who had some injuries in the middle of his games as well, which didn't help. And then I just think the QB situation isn't quite working itself out the way he expected.
I mean, it's tough. Jamar Chase and Williams and he had production, but he's in a weird spot. He's sitting at 1-2. This is his first win, and his quarterback situation is really scary right now. The rest of his team is still productive and doing fairly well. But the real story of this game is poor Daniel. My man puts up almost 100 points. He would have beaten half the teams in the league this week, including Cam and Biondi and Lamon and Sean. He beats all of them, and he loses the game because he plays Taint, who puts up 120. Like, poor Daniel cannot catch a break. And, but there's signs of life there. I mean, he did start Jennings, which is, crazy. Dude put up 41 and had 3 touchdowns. But anyway, and they still lost to the Rams. But anyway, Caleb Williams and Mahomes are still the heart and soul. He desperately needs a running back. So, maybe if there was some way a trade can happen, George Pickens is on his team. Maybe he trades him away for somebody. Maybe a running back is in there. I don't know. I can't predict the future, but it's possible. And here's hoping Danny can figure that out. Kareem Hunt maybe is that person, but his running back room putting up a total of 2 points, less than 2 points, is really, really tough in a game where you scored 100.
Yep, and now we can move on. There were no picks this week, so we didn't lose any of our picks this week. Good job, Chris.
1-5 the 1 week we did picks.
Yeah, you were.
Dude, that's crazy.
So moving on to the standings, Big T's at the top of Penn State, Lamb Chop with the shocking second place in the Penn State to this point. And then we up, and then Chris, and then Trent, and Skullcap. So our champion is now in 4th place in his own division, and Lamb Chop is up to 2nd. Looking at the Stony Brook division, Biondi's on the top right now, and then Trevor, and then Cam, and then Mr. Bryce, and then me, and then Danny. So 2 bottom dwellers, and then people at least trying to contend at least.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There seems to be a little bit more competition happening in the Penn State division. There's no undefeated teams and no teams that haven't won a game. While in the Stony Brook division, you and Danny refused to win, and Trevor nope, you're bad at that. Biondi lost. You have Biondi first at 3-0. Biondi lost. No, I'm tired of you getting things wrong. You also just said that the champion was in 4th. Well, I'm in 4th, and I've never won a championship. Trent is in 5th. So don't be mean to me, because that's what you do. You be mean to me.
You do the sheet next time if you want to do it.
Nah, that's way too much.
Yeah, so I guess we can move on to the rankings. I can do mine first. I had Tom in 1st, and I had Biondi in 2nd, and I had Trevor in 3rd.
Well, can we go one by one?
Sure.
Because I also have Tom in 1st. There's no reason to skip after we both have Tom in first. All right, and then you said Biondi second.
I had Biondi in second.
Well, I got Trevor in second.
To be fair, I made this list before I traded with Trevor, so.
Oh, the excuses are real. All right, he's already copping out on things. It's fine.
But we'll stick with Biondi for this week, just because, and therefore that's going to inform how I'm going to pick my next pick.
And Trevor's third. Well, I put Cam in third because Cam beat Biondi this week.
I did not put Cam third, and I did not put Cam fourth because I put Mitchell for fourth.
Well, that is just rude. I put Biondi fourth.
All right. And then now I put Cam fifth.
Okay. And I put myself in fifth because I'm better than Mitch, and he should know that.
And you went to sixth.
Well, that's crazy because that's where Mitch belongs.
This is probably the worst podcast we've done so far.
Oh, it's real bad. It's going really poorly. The energy's not there. The comedic effect is not there.
We're literally going through this like a list, but I'm going to keep going now. All right, so I had Trent seventh. I think that Trent's team is just hurt right now. He'd probably be a little higher if he didn't have so many injuries, but I don't know when those guys are coming back, and they're all old.
I'm putting Taint there because I want to be different.
Okay. Well, I put Taint next. I think if his quarterbacks start getting healthy, his team's really good, so he could see himself moving up as well.
Oh, I completely lied. I put Lamb Chop ahead of Taint. So I actually have Taint here. My buddy Lamb Chop deserves the respect. His team is terrible, but that dude does not lose. He's the best GM and coach in this league because his team is bad, but they play for him, man. That dude just refuses to lose, and so he belongs wherever I said he belonged. Number 9, you went Skull Daddy. I think I will put Trent there because I am not making this list up on the fly. I put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, I think Skullcap is still here. I don't know if he starts trading or not, but for now he'll stay there. And then I went Lamb Chop next. I just don't think he's had the running backs so far, but it seems like those roles might be going away soon, so have him a little lower than he probably should be.
Yeah, and I'll put Trent there, and then I will finish with you and then Danny because poor Danny.
Danny, I think Lamb Chop beat his over already, didn't he?
So did Trevor.
Yeah, so good job.
Oh no, Trevor's may have been 4. Dude, the Orioles are going nuts.
Good. All right. Moving on.
Excuse me.
Moving on. We'll do the next week's preview. 2 good teams in the Stony Brook division. We have Mr. McGee with his brand new team and all the shiny new toys, and versus Biondi, who's probably the other best team in the division. So I think these are the 2 best teams in the Stony Brook division. What are you so mad about?
Cam beat him last week. To be the man, you got to beat the man, and he lost to the man.
I don't care. Anyway, moving on to the matchups. So on Trevor's side, he has Sam Darnold versus at Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers versus Denver in the lineup right now. And Steve has Anthony Richardson versus Pittsburgh and Jared Goff versus Seattle.
Yeah, and so I think the advantage does go to Mr. Biondi here. I think it's slight, but Darnold, everything looks okay, but that injury is a little scary. Aaron Rodgers having to go to Mile High. He'll probably – oh, no, he's home. He's home. They're home. He's not going to Mile High because that would have been a problem. He probably couldn't breathe with whatever crazy medication he wants to take and horse pills and whatever else he's doing. But Goff against Seattle, I think Goff has underperformed a little bit fantasy-wise, and this could be a game where he turns it up. And then even though Pittsburgh is kind of turned their games into like little slogs and slow and low scoring, I think Anthony Richardson, comeback week, tough week last week, but I think I give the slight edge to Biondi here.
Yeah, it's so hard because Anthony Richardson's actually been pretty bad fantasy wise, but he theoretically should be good fantasy wise. I'm having a tough time with this one, but Denver I think is a tough matchup for Rodgers, and therefore I'll just lean Steve slightly here.
Which brings us to running back, and I'm slightly confused because I don't know the schedule this week. Okay, so that makes more sense. So you have that Biondi has Bijan Robinson, who plays for the Falcons, playing at Philadelphia, while Alvin Kamara, who plays for New Orleans, is playing the Falcons. So that would have been a fun three-way NFL game happening. But it turns out that they are playing one another, and that's what I thought, but I had to double check because Bijan is not playing Philadelphia.
He could be though.
But he's not. I mean, I guess if he got traded to who's playing the Eagles this week, he could be. But you got Bijan and Kamara versus Saquon and the brand new Jonathan Taylor. And again, I'm going to give the edge to Biondi for the simple reason that I think Anthony Richardson is going to steal touchdowns away from Jonathan Taylor, which, as I said, I think Biondi wins in quarterback. And Biondi's going to win here because although Saquon, he's going to slow down just a little bit, Bijan's going to step it up a little against New Orleans, and Jonathan Taylor is going to have his touchdown stolen by Anthony Richardson.
I don't like that. I'm going to say the opposite happens. Taylor and Saquon combined for 50 points. That's my old running back duo. Now Trevor has them, so they're going to play well, and he's going to win the league. So
I should have realized the Jake curse and think Jonathan Taylor is going to go he may set a record. He may score 70 points by himself this week.
He might. You never know. Look what I did to Trent's team. I just talk about how good his team was, and instantly the whole team got hurt. So you don't want me to like your team. Is the theme of this story here. Moving on to the receivers, Garrett Wilson versus Denver. Same matchup as Rodgers, obviously, and then the new CeeDee Lamb versus at the New York Giants. He should put up a lot of points in that matchup. Looking at Steve's team, he has Olave at Atlanta and Nico Collins versus Jacksonville. I like CeeDee the best out of these, but I think I like Steve's other two receivers combined more. So I'm going to go with the Steve receivers.
Yeah, I'm pretty low on Garrett Wilson going into the Denver week. I feel like that is a tough matchup. And, he, other than one really kind of big week, he's kind of been a little disappointing. CeeDee Lamb against the Giants, like you said, should be a pretty good matchup for him. I'm not huge on Olave or Nico Collins. Olave in Atlanta, I think can be a tough matchup. That Atlanta defense is a little spookier than I think people realize, and AJ Terrell and stuff sitting out there. Nico Collins, I still haven't figured out that Houston offense. And so I think just because of CeeDee Lamb, got to give the vibes to Trevor.
All right.
Going on to tight end. Kittle versus New England for Trevor, and Dalton Schultz versus Jacksonville. I frankly think that this is a battle to who can score 8, and I think Kittle has a better chance to do that. So I'll give Trevor the advantage there.
So this is based on their lineup. I don't think Trevor should start Kittle. I think Devontae Smith and probably A.J. Brown don't play this week, which means that he should probably start Dallas Goedert there, in my opinion. If he starts Goedert, I'd like it a lot more, but I still like Kittle better than Schultz.
Fair enough. Which brings us to the flex. Trevor sitting there with Devonta Adams. Biondi sitting there with Joe Mixon right now. I guess this theoretically could be Kenneth Walker or Cam Akers, I guess. Maybe there's Keon Coleman or Lazard in there if Joe Mixon can't go. But assuming both these players play, Joe Mixon's back. He'll have a big week. I'll give Biondi the advantage in flex, given Mixon is playing.
Yeah, I will also give him a slight advantage at the flex. Overall, I think quarterback's close enough. I think Trevor will have a decent lead at running back, and then everything else is kind of close, and I like Kittle a decent amount more than Schultz, so I'll go with Trevor.
Fair enough. I think Trevor has more of what you'd kind of consider a boom or bust kind of team in some ways. And except for quarterback, really. And I think that quarterback runs the day for Biondi, and I will give Biondi the slight advantage here. So Biondi, you are going to get a win, and that removes another undefeated team from our rankings. Moving on to the next game, we have the Mighty Marvin Power Rangers versus Skull Daddy. So in a fun Penn State division, Jake's considering this game the underperformer versus the overperformer. Oh, nope. Jake just did not change it from last week. So maybe I do need to start doing these because, gosh, this is terrible. This is amateur hour out here. Anyway, at the quarterback position, as of right now, it's Lamar against Buffalo and Gino against Detroit for Sean. And then I, as of right now, have Dak against the Giants and Trevor Lawrence against Houston. And I would give Sean a pretty decent advantage here. Oh, I can't hear you.
I'm going to say you have a slight advantage there.
That's crazy.
What?
I said, that's crazy.
What's crazy?
Thinking I have an advantage.
Oh. Well, I think Dak is going to have a really good game against the Giants. The Giants are awful, as everyone knows. I think Lawrence versus Houston, I think he could have possibly a pretty good week there. I expect Houston to put up a decent amount of points, so he should be throwing the ball a lot. I think the Baltimore-Buffalo game might be a little lower scoring than people expect, and then Gino, I like Lawrence more than Gino, so you have a slight advantage at quarterback, I'd say. Moving on to the running backs, I think, well, you have ETN at Houston and Brian Robinson at Arizona. And Sean has Hubbard versus Cincinnati and Dobbins versus Kansas City. Looking at that, I think you have a pretty good advantage there. I mean, J.K. Dobbins has been pretty good to this point, but I don't know how much further that'll go, how much his knees will hold up. Hubbard had a really good game last week, but I think your running backs are just more established, so I just trust them more.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can pretty much almost knock me down for 20 points for running back almost every week. It just feels like that's what they're going to give me, whether it's they get into the end zone or whether they run for about 100 yards. It's just what happens there. So I will give myself a slight advantage here. I don't have much faith with Chuba. Maybe against Cincinnati, who's just been really scary to watch. And then I think JK's probably not what he was in week 1 and week 2. I don't, especially if Herbert's not playing, why, throw 8 men in the box and don't let them run the ball. So moving on to wide receiver, we have myself with JJ against Green Bay and Marvin against Washington, while Sean's walking out with Amon-Ra against Seattle and Mike Evans against the Eagles. Tough matchup this week for JJ with Jair Alexander. However, I see like 3 reports that JJ is going to have an off week because of Jair Alexander, but correct me if I'm wrong, he like smokes Green Bay a lot. And Jair Alexander's been there. So I don't know why that is a constant thought, but Jair Alexander's elite. So don't get me wrong. Marvin is possibly hurt, so this may possibly turn into DJ Moore or Rome Odunze. He is questionable this week, but gotta love what you've seen from him so far. Amon-Ra, tough with that Seattle secondary, tough with that Seattle defense. And then Mike Evans has taken a step back. So I think because of Mike Evans, I give myself the edge here, but it's not as much as I think Amon-Ra probably may score the most out of anyone, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Yep. Yeah, I'm actually gonna lean Sean here this week specifically. I think so. Alexander and Jefferson like trade. They each have bad games and good games, so it's kind of weird. You kind of pick your poison, which way it's going to go this week. I think Mike Evans showed up on the injury report, but he'll probably end up playing. I know he had a couple bad weeks, but he's mostly a touchdown guy, so assuming he gets a touchdown this week, I'll project that. And then I think Amon-Ra probably scores the most points out of all these guys, so I'll lean Sean a little bit there. Moving on to tight end, it's Kelce at the Chargers, and you have Ferguson at the Giants. I'm gonna make a bold prediction that Travis Kelce comes back and scores some points this week. I don't know if that's a bold prediction or not, but I'm gonna say Kelce is an advantage this week. He hasn't been so far this year. I think Ferguson missed the game. He probably has more points than Kelce still, so I'm gonna roll with Kelce this week.
So I actually think both tight ends are going to have quite the week this week. Jake Ferguson, not because he's going to be good at football, but I know he posted that him and his girl are out doing things and they're hanging out. His girl is that famous basketball player lady with her twin. I don't know their names, but they're twins. They played for Miami. I don't know. They have names. I don't know. Doesn't matter. But he posted something that he was with her. So I was like, bad week for him, football. That's what I thought. Travis Kelce, I think it is not a bold prediction to say he's coming back. It is now week 3, and they're basically they're week 4, but all they've been talking about is how he's been struggling. And Mahomes is like, well, we're going to start making some extra efforts to get him the ball. That does not feel like a fluke. Kelce is going to go off for 25 points, maybe 20, but I have faith he's coming back, and Sean easily wins the tight end battle. And which brings us to the flex. Right now, it's DJ Moore for me versus the Rams, and he has Calvin Ridley at Miami. I give myself the advantage here. However, if Marv isn't playing, then you consider this as maybe Roma Dunze, and I still think I give myself the advantage there. But Calvin against Miami, I don't have the most belief in, especially with Will Levis being Will Levis. But I'll give myself a slight advantage for the flex.
Yep, fair enough. I think you also have an advantage. Seems like DJ Moore is starting to get on track with Caleb, so I definitely would prefer him. The Rams defense isn't anything special this year. Overall, I'm going to pick you this week. I think the quarterbacks are better. The receivers are close enough. And then I like your RBs and your flex a decent amount more.
I am going with what could be considered an upset. Sean beats me because of Travis Kelce.
Okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get this rolling. Moving on to the next game, we have Big T versus Trent. So that's Tom versus Trent. The quarterback matchups, it's CJ Stroud at home versus Jacksonville, and Jordan Love versus Minnesota. And then Trent has Josh Allen at Baltimore and Stafford at Chicago. I think Trent's QBs have worse matchups. Therefore, I'm just gonna lean with Tom's quarterbacks, although I like all the quarterbacks in this matchup.
Tom's quarterbacks win by a decent amount. It's pretty straightforward. I have faith in whichever Green Bay quarterback plays, and I have faith in Stroud to bounce back a little bit from last week. Josh Allen is not going to dominate that way, and I don't see Stafford having a big week against Chicago. Running back wise, Breece Hall and Derrick Henry versus Josh Jacobs and Rico Dowdle right now. I'm not even going to talk about it. Tom has a ginormous advantage.
Yep, definitely. Moving on to receiver, Tom has Rashee Rice and Malik Neighbors, 2 top 5 receivers, as Chris said before, and Trent has Tyreek Hill and Brandon Ayuk. I don't think any of these matchups are awful. I'm just going to lean Tom because his guys have been better and they have their quarterback still. So,
yeah. And just to clarify, when I said top 5, that is in their stats over this season so far. I am not declaring them top 5 wide receivers in the league, but just to clarify.
No, Chris thinks they're both top 5 receivers in the league.
Maybe one day. But I agree. I think Tom has the advantage here. Hill is missing Tua greatly. And again, Ayuk hasn't shown much to me, and I'm lower on him than everyone else. Moving on to tight end. Tom consistently is looking for a tight end. Brenton Strange had 10 points this week, and he dropped him. So, Tom is moving things around. And then Laporta is going to get back on track. Advantage here.
Yep. Yeah, I think Laporta's definitely due. Maybe it's been pretty much all running backs for that offense, so maybe the receivers start getting going this week, catch some touchdowns, and Jared Goff gets going as well. Looking at the flex, it's Drake London versus New Orleans for Tom, and Godwin versus Philly for Trent. I'm gonna say Godwin. I think Godwin's like the number 1 receiver in the league so far this year. Don't expect that to move forward, but okay, he's saying no, so maybe not. But Godwin's a top 5 receiver definitely so far this year, and it's not a bad matchup versus Philly.
The only reason I'm saying no is because I looked early as Malik Neighbors. He is number 1 in points this year so far. So that's the only reason I knew that answer off the top of my head. I'm not, I am curious at where Godwin is. Godwin is number 3. So I am going to say Trent has a huge advantage here because I'm speaking things into existence, and I want Godwin to take away all of Mike Evans' points, and Trent gets a big score from Chris Godwin over Drake London. Bringing it to the final predictions, Tom wins this handily.
I think it'll be a somewhat close game. I think Tyreek maybe catches a long touchdown or something, keeps him in the game, and then maybe the quarterbacks do a little better for Trent than we're expecting. But I do think Tom is going to pull it out in the end. Moving on to the next game, another game of the week. That's cool. Lamb Chop has Jaden Daniels at Arizona and Baker versus Philly. And Mitch has Burrow at Carolina and Dalton versus Cincinnati. So two quarterbacks playing each other. So I guess Mitch is really hoping that that's a shootout there. I'm going to give a slight advantage to Mitch this week. I think both those defenses are miserable. I think Burrows has all his weapons back now. Still hard to fully trust Daniels, and then Baker's struggled the last couple weeks. So I'm gonna go with Mitch with the advantage at quarterback.
I was gonna do that, but because you picked them, I'll be different. I'm not. Burrow and Dalton in his revenge game, I think I'll give the slight edge to Mitch there. However, I would not be surprised if Lyman wins that, but I do think give the edge to Mitch. Just because, fun revenge game, playing each other, bad defenses may end up being a fun shootout. Moving on to running back, Lamb Chop still starting Charbonnet and Irving, while Mitch has A-Chain and Tony Pollard. A-Chain has looked not as great recently. Mitch again has the 2 teams that are playing each other. Tony Pollard has kind of shown out to be RB1 for Tennessee, even though there was questions before the season started. This one for me kind of comes down to whether or not Kenneth Walker plays, because I think that has a huge determination on Charbonnet's worth. So I will give the edge to Mitch, and I would think that Tony Pollard is probably the number 1 running back for points this week in this game.
Yep, I'm going to give a pretty big advantage to Mitch. I think Miami could score points against Tennessee anyway, so I think A-Chain's probably scoring some points this game, and I think Pollard will also score a decent amount of points. Both Lamb Chops running backs, I think, are the RB2s for their team this week, so can't really project them more than Mitch's. But moving on to receiver, Lamb Chop has Jaden Reed versus Minnesota and Xavier Worthy at the Chargers. Mitch has Cortland Sutton at the Jets and Deontay Johnson versus Cincinnati. I think Cortland Sutton has a really tough matchup this week. I think Sauce is a really bad matchup for him. Deontay probably has the best matchup of all these guys, but that being said, I kind of like Lamb Chop's receivers a little bit more this week. I think they'll both get good touches, and yeah, but I don't expect huge production from anyone here, really.
Yeah, I think I would give the edge to Mitch because of Deontay Johnson. I think that he just has a chance to be the best receiver in this one. So that's it. I think it's so I will give the edge to Lamb Chop in total, but I think Deontay Johnson ends up being the high scorer. I just don't see much out of Cortland Sutton. Mitch desperately needs AJ Brown and Debo to be back. But that moves us to tight end. We have Brock Bowers for Lemon against Cleveland and Kincaid against Baltimore. I love me some Brock Bowers, but Kincaid is probably the pick this week, and he probably has the better chance to get into the end zone, which kind of is what makes or breaks a tight end.
Yep, I'm going to roll with Bowers. I think he'll get probably over 5 receptions. Just going to count on that and the yardage. Kincaid hasn't been super duper involved in that offense to this point, so just going to roll with Bowers because I'm pretty sure he's going to get at least 7 targets and have 5 catches. Moving on to the flex, Lamb Chop has Lad McConkey versus Kansas City, and Mitch has James Conner versus Washington. I think this is pretty easily Mitch here. I expect Conner to have a pretty big week. Washington has a pretty bad defense, and especially if Marvin's injured or limited or whatnot, they're going to give the ball to James Conner a bunch.
Yep, I'm in agreement, and I think this is kind of the beginning of the end of Lamb Chop's Cinderella season, and Mitch gets the W here.
Yep, agreed. All right, moving on to my game. This is taking it all out of me. The quarterback situation, I have Kyler and Fields. Kyler's playing versus Washington, and Fields is versus Indianapolis. Bryce has Brock Purdy versus New England, and Justin Herbert versus Kansas City if he plays. I'm going to give myself the advantage here. I'm not even sure Herbert's going to play this week. He re-aggravated his high ankle sprain, so I'm guessing he doesn't play. And then that leaves Bryce with 1 quarterback.
I give you the advantage here. I don't think Herbert plays. I don't think he should play. I think there's an argument he shouldn't have played last week. But here we are. So I do give you the advantage there, and I think it's a pretty big advantage. I trust Kyler to be big, and think you win at quarterback pretty handily. Moving on to running back, you go Stevenson at San Francisco and DeMont against Seattle versus Kyron and Gibbs. I'm going to give Taint the advantage, but I don't think it's a huge advantage. I think DeMont can very easily steal some points away from Gibbs this week. And I don't think Kyron goes back-to-back crazy weeks. I've been actually kind of impressed with Chicago, as weird as that is, so far. I know rookie quarterback, and people say he hasn't been great, but I think there are some signs there, and I give him a slight advantage, but I think the running back's actually pretty close.
Yeah, I give him a pretty significant advantage. Kyron was one of the best running backs last year. He's been so far this year. Same way you're saying Monty could steal from Gibbs. If Monty doesn't get a touchdown, then he's not going to be super useful. So could see this being pretty big advantage for Bryce, or it might be somewhat minimal the way you're thinking about it. But I definitely think Bryce should get an advantage either way. Moving on to receiver, I have it's hard to say. T. Higgins at Carolina and Khalil Shakir at Baltimore. And Bryce has Jamar Chase at Carolina and Brandon Cooks at the Giants. Yeah, I'm going to go with Bryce because he's not starting Khalil Shakir.
So, as crazy as it is, I think I'm going to go with you. Higgins is back. He is going to take away the touches from Jamar, and I don't care about the second one. This feels like Higgins versus Jamar, and I have the gut feeling that Higgins beats Jamar this week. So I will give you a slight advantage at wide receiver. At tight end, I also giving you advantage because I think Cole Kmet beats Hunter Henry. At the flex, I am also giving you the advantage because Zach Moss is going to score a touchdown. And so I gave you the advantage at almost every position, and you're going to get the upset after you traded all your team away, and Taint is going to get a loss.
I actually kind of agree with you somehow. I think I might win this game. I don't know how that's possible, but I might end up winning this game, guys. That being said, I'll probably score like 60 points and lose by 40. But anyway, I'm going to pick myself anyway, and we're going to win this game, guys. So
it's the reverse Jake curse. You wanted to lose, so now you'll win. All right. Moving on to our final game, Danny versus Cam, 0-3 versus 3-0. Mahomes and Caleb Williams for Danny versus Jalen and Minshew. I am going Danny with a big win at quarterback this week. Mahomes and Caleb turn it up against the LA teams, and Minshew gives Cam nothing, and Hurts ends up being okay, but Mahomes and Caleb show out and show why Danny has them as their 1-2 QBs.
Hot take: Minshew loses the job this week. I think. I think that Danny has a big advantage. I think they combine for 50, and Danny gets the quarterback scoring that he was expecting starting the year. Moving on to running back, Danny has Jalen Warren. Maybe. I know he's a little hurt at Indianapolis, and Ty Chandler at Green Bay versus James Cook at Baltimore and Jordan Mason versus New England. I don't think we have to talk about this too much. Cam has a pretty big advantage. Danny's still a little weak at running back. Moving on to wide receiver. Danny's got Devontae Smith at Tampa Bay and Zay Flowers versus Buffalo. Cam has Diggs versus Jacksonville and Metcalf at Detroit. I think this is a little closer than some might expect. I'm gonna go for the upset. I think Zay Flowers has a big week. I'm gonna give Danny the advantage and call it a day.
I don't think that's an upset.
No,
I think that's the choice. I don't know. I even if Devonta doesn't play, Pickens and Flowers, I pick over Diggs and Metcalf at this point. I know Metcalf had his big week, and Diggs has shown out a little bit, but I don't know. I have a little bit more faith in Danny's wide receivers right there. Cam is already mad at me because the Braves won last night, and they're hopefully going to win some more when this hurricane passes. But moving on to tight end, we got Jonnu versus Zach Ertz. Cam squeaks out a tight end win, probably 10-5, 10-3, something like that. But a nice little score points there for Cam.
Jonnu Smith catches a touchdown this week. Next hot take. Jonnu Smith scores 12 fantasy points and wins this matchup by 8 points. Moving on to the flex, Danny has Juwan Jennings versus New England versus Rashid Shaheed at Atlanta. Juwan Jennings just scored 40 fantasy points. Why not another 20? I'm going to go with Juwan Jennings. And I'm going to pick Danny because I somehow picked him for like 4 of these, even though Cam's 3-0.
So I just don't think the flex matters. These guys don't combine for 10 this week. It's just gonna happen. I'm a little annoyed you got to say your choice first because I wrote Danny down first. So you were just copying me, and everyone should know it. So I'm going upset as well. I am predicting that both 3-0 teams lose this week, and we are no longer have anybody undefeated. I also picked that both 0-3 teams win this week, so that we have nobody undefeated and no teams that haven't won a game. So I am real fun.
You know what? Now I'm mad. I'm switching to Cam. That's going to make me win our picks thing this week.
Dude, you're already winning your picks thing.
All right. I think
But
that's
that's a
it.
really bad podcast that we just did. That was
Yeah.
probably the worst we've ever done. That didn't go well. But we hope all of our fans enjoyed it. We also forgot to play our sponsor. There's so many new Brisk commercials out there with our boy Trevor's voice in them. There you go. Jake didn't know how to make it spell Coca-Cola. So we are not sponsored, just so anyone knows. But once we get 1,000 followers, we can be monetized. So, subscribe, hit the bell, and those things that you do to subscribe. Like the video and comment.
Thanks, guys.